2 sentences.
Oh, that's great.
Bo has presented to Mastery Circle before, where it was in person, and several years ago, and we knew him then as Swami Gyanmitra Prem Prasad. I think just Prem Prasad's what I remember. Anyway, he has devoted his life to exploring, mastering, and sharing modalities of healing, attainment, and liberation. He's the founder of Shamanic Studies 3-year program of advanced initiation in shamanism and shamanic healing, and is pursuing a graduate degree in psychology. He's recently completed Conscious Uncoupling, which is what he's going to share with us this morning. And I sent out his bio with all of his information, so I will stop there. Welcome, Bo. So happy you're with us again.
Thank you so much, Mary Grace. Yeah, and Michelle reminded me I met her with that old name, and that's a different story. And thank you, Mary Grace, and everyone for your flexibility. I've been doing a lot of studies into narcissism and spiritual ego and those traps on this mastery process we're on, and cults. And if anyone saw The Vow, it's extraordinary, and NXIVM. And so I've been passionate about that, and I wanted to present on that and explain the name change and dropping the whole big Swami Lama Rama Prasad bigness just to Bo, nice and simple. But then something said, you know what, let's share about conscious uncoupling. And as I was sitting here with the check-ins, it really hit me at the Mastery Circle. What a concept, mastering divorce or mastering breaking up, right? And I want to echo what came up a couple times already, the levity. I'm going to bring in as much levity as possible on this relatively deep, unpleasant at times subject. So yeah, I wanted to echo the levity. We'll keep it there as much as possible. But I think it's pretty common knowledge, probably the majority of us know, that the divorce rate in the United States is over 50%. And Southern California, where a lot of us were, it's well over 60% now. And that does not count all of the dissatisfied couples and all of the other breakups and significant uncouplings, people that live together a long time. Like, it's a very massive, I'm not going to say problem, but what an opportunity. You know, I'm even now shifting Conscious Uncoupling, which is kind of the brand and the bestseller and all that, into mastering separating. So that's the little goal here for the Mastery Circle today. And I also wanted to apply a nice piece from the Tao presentation there. What jumped out to me when thinking about uncoupling was those words presented, unwavering harmony. Wow, what a possibility when you think of, I don't know if anyone else like me has had a broken heart or maybe broken someone's heart. And one of the other beautiful things about conscious uncoupling is it applies to other relationships too, business partners and hopefully not children, but old friends, where acquaintances, where things just shift, basic business agreements, bringing that unwavering harmony into the completion and closure through all relationships. So I wanted to name that. Also wanted to underscore with some of the heaviness that can be in this circle of breaking up and uncoupling, what Michael said, that those moments of joy and gratitude. And it was coming up to me how we're not necessarily taught that, at least by and large in the West, to have those. And it's harder to sell things to those who are happy. That's what was coming up when I was really dropping into some moments of joy and gratitude here with y'all, as I was remembering, I'm in Vietnam right now. I spent the last 2.5 months touring through Southeast Asia, and remembering, it's been with COVID quite a while since I've got to do a ton of travel, and just how different the orientation is in the East, and slower. It's wonderful. So I was just reflecting on that, and that dives into some interesting numbers. In preparing for this, just in a brief search, we talked about in the coach training that the divorce is a $50 billion year industry. Every year in America, $50 billion in the divorce industry. So that breaks down to 1 million divorces in the United States every year. That's one every 36 seconds, nearly 2,400 per day, and 16,500 per week. And tying that in with the moments of joy and gratitude and how we're trained in, at least in the West, my theory, when you're fixated on the negative and the pain, you're much more apt to buy things and pursue externally. But us as masters and masters in training, we can dive in and find the fulfillment. So that's my little capitalism soapbox that I'll hop off of. And all those numbers, the divorce rates and the numbers I just quoted and the industry, that was pre-COVID. Pre-COVID. I haven't actually locked into the big numbers of precisely how things have changed. I just know anecdotally so many friends breaking up, so many divorces happening, the depression rate skyrocketing. And so personally, for a lot of those who I've met before, back in 2020, when I left America and I was down in Costa Rica and Mexico, client after client after client of mine was going through breakups and divorces and struggling with the COVID and the pandemic. So I went out and I got Gottman certified level 2. Gottman, the John and Julie Gottman are kind of the most famous couples counseling, because I could see this pandemic and the pressure and being together 24/7. It was not doing well. So did that in December of 2020. And then that was wonderful, and it was great working that way with people and couples. And then April of 2021, my longtime girlfriend and I broke up for the 5th time. And that was pretty devastating. I thought that one was the one. And that really catapulted. I went through this existential crisis. Like, I've been coaching people almost 2 decades and I'm trained up the wazoo, and I just finished couples counseling. What the heck? And that launched me into this commitment to really dive into conscious uncoupling. Just a quick check-in by show of hands. How many people have heard the term or are aware of the book, or is this kind of brand new, the conscious uncoupling modality, or is anyone aware of it? Yeah, Lisa, Robin, a little bit. Great. I forget when I first heard about it. Being in Southern California in the spiritual scene for a couple of decades, it had been circling around. And I remember how I really dove in 2019 when my former and I had our 4th breakup. I did something, and I thought it was our final. I did something I'd never done before. I read this book back to back 5 times in a row and just loved it. It is a beautiful synthesis of a lot of great things. And I read the book, immediately started up again, I think maybe the same day. And then the next day, read it again, back and forth, hired a coach. I was committed to this concept. It just resonated for me in 2019. And they recommend 6 sessions. There's 5 steps to conscious uncoupling. We'll get to those at the end of the presentation. And so I did the 6 sessions and kept going for a while and just loved the work and was able to reconcile with my former. And we made these new commitments and again, thought we were going. We left America together in 2020 and broke up for the final time. And that propelled me into really dive into this conscious uncoupling technology, because we had a lot at stake. We had a month before breaking up, we had just launched Soul's Enterprise together. We had always talked about being business partners, and now we had this together. So the stakes were very high with our thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours into this new venture. So that really propelled me to get this conscious uncoupling coach certification. And a couple of years later, here I am. So that's my personal story and how I got into this new, beautiful, beautiful game. And it really is, I believe, revolutionary because the breaking up and the divorce are often so vicious, so frequently brings out the worst in us, right? Who was saying earlier, I'd like to say, we can get so cattywampus. We can get so darn cattywampus in it. Ah, there we go, Bonnie. All right. And if you think about it for a minute, I'm going to assume here, looking out at, I think 29 people here, right just shy of 30, and those percentages that we have some divorcees here and or some breakups and broken hearts. And first thing I really want to say is that it is one of the most underrated traumas. We don't, there's so many people, friends, clients, talk about how, the encouragement is to, just get out there again and get dating and, get over it, forget about it. Oh, that person was an a-hole and they dicked you over. There's really a lacking, I believe, by and large, lacking empathy around just how awful it is divorcing and breaking up. And so, yeah, there's a long talk. I won't get into the long details, but first thing we really sit with in conscious uncoupling is just being with that trauma and naming just how severe it is and the destabilization and how our life gets turned upside down. And looking at the word, and one common idea that might come in, I want to clear up the first common misunderstanding about conscious uncoupling and what might come to mind. Conscious uncoupling is based for individuals, not couples. And when it came into when Gwyneth Paltrow and her husband divorced in 2014, that's when it got really famous and became a best-selling book. But yeah, I want to first and foremost say it's not for couples. It's based for individuals. Now, it's great if a couple wants to do it together, and I love working with couples. But the important thing is the timing will be different, right? The Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. It's nonlinear. And so as beautiful as it is to have that intention to uncouple together, and that's great, and there's tweaks to the process and the 5 steps, but it really is an inside job and an individual job, and all the better if possible. And the second misconception I want to put out there and offer to everyone is that it's not time bound. That is to say, it can be done anytime, because as I'm going to assume some of us here can relate to, the woundings can last a really long time, years, decades, and they push on such old buttons in us. So the conscious uncoupling technology can be used at any time, even back old relationships. So the first concept that I'd like to explore, it's really neat, is the languaging. Most of us who've studied communication and relationships, and I'm looking around at a bunch of masters, know that it's very smart to avoid polarizing words like always and never. You say to your significant other, you always leave the toilet seat up, you never listen to me enough. That's going to make someone defensive. And it's interesting in conscious uncoupling how the languaging we use. It's so violent, isn't it? We're breaking up. We broke up. My ex. I got dumped. The languaging itself, to get to the masterful consciousness, it's really neat to start looking at what languaging we use around separating. And so, for example, I've shifted entirely, and you're only going to hear about my former, or one of my favorite, and this is not from conscious uncoupling, but a friend of mine talks about her husband. If anyone's heard of a husband before, I love that word. Want to offer that to everyone to please share it. And so the biggest 2 key pieces from conscious uncoupling, and the first huge takeaway, is peace and respect. And it sounds great in a bunch of masters here. Yeah, of course. But if you think back to those emotions flaring and the intensity of that bond being broken, it actually really is something to be peaceful and keep that goal, especially when there's kids at stake. Always, if there's any divorce or separation, breakup, separating. I'm not saying breakup anymore. I always focus on the kids first and remember that motivation. And then also divorce-wise, it's so great. I work hard to stay away from attorneys and avoid that if possible. So those are going to help towards the peace and respect. Peace and respect are the big hallmarks for conscious uncoupling. And that's what I would offer for us masters here in that direction. And then the bonuses who can really go for it, and I'm happy, like I said, I was so committed myself and how my former and I are doing to keep these goals of kindness and generosity. Those are the sort of bonuses that once peace and respect are established, maybe can move in towards kindness and generosity. The other nice big shift that came in conscious uncoupling, I've been big for a number of years into exiting the victim-perpetrator dynamic. And conscious uncoupling really puts a magnifying glass up to responsibility, and we focus on it. So even if the partner was cheating and abusive and awful and terrible, we say, okay, it can be 97% their fault, sure. But conscious uncoupling being an inside job, we want to look at, in that example, our 3%. What part of us stayed in, or in whatever ways encouraged the mistreatment or tolerated it, and really examining what set us up for this dynamic. And that's very freeing, because obviously when we talk about that peace and respect, it's going to start with ourselves, right? And how many times have we heard about self-love and how to get to self-love? So we really begin when we dive into the uncoupling and what happened, even if it's 97% their fault, to take our 3% responsibility is a really empowering shift, and is going to take the focus off of them, keep the spinning cycle from getting stuck in that. So very important on the responsibility piece. Also want to name the Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. I'm sure the majority of us have heard them, but really important when we move through the steps, and especially at the beginning, to sit with that grief and how it manifests. The denial, the bargaining, the anger, the depression, and then the acceptance. And as probably the majority of us know, not in that order, and back and forth, non-linear. I think I shared previously in the Mastery Circle, I've just been really fascinated since 2016, 2017 with different components of trauma healing. And it took my logical, masculine, engineering-oriented brain to really embrace the non-linearity of healing. When I first was looking at these 5 stages of grief, denial, bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance, I really wanted to put them together in a nice box and make kind of a game out of it and move through each of them in this systematic way. And working with individuals and couples this way and slowing down being with their trauma, it's a tremendous shift, dropping into that acceptance that it's not a straight process. It's not an easy point A to point B. Oh, okay, the trauma's gone. It's back and forth and over, and being there. It's been such an honor being on the ride with people as they cycle through. And it's so unique to each person. A lot of you know too, I'm just fascinated by karma and how we take it in. And I'm a big reincarnation believer. And so what's traumatic to one person, like seeing a car wreck, it's completely traumatizing to one person and nothing to another person. I posit that it's based upon past lives and karma. So how we respond to a separation, breaking up, is going to be, there's so many variables, and of course our childhood and everything else. So yeah, there's a lot of beautiful trauma work in conscious uncoupling too. So there's 5 steps to the conscious uncoupling process, and before looking at any of the 5 steps, we do assess to see if there's any hope to salvage the relationship. That's where it's wonderful looking at the Gottman method and the other ways to salvage. And generally, maybe 10 to 15% is it salvageable. By and large, if you're at the point where you're thinking conscious uncoupling, you're over the cliff. But it is delightful, those few, to be able to salvage. And that's the first thing, is really sit with it. I've so many times, very, very early on working with people, I picked up actually from a client, and I'm delighted to share it with everyone for almost 20 years now, that you want to be so careful with that D word, divorce, and not use it until you're pretty confident. It should be last moment. I counsel over and over and over again to bring the skillfulness and consciousness to these very difficult conversations about things not working in a relationship. And so without further ado, that can get us into the 5 steps of conscious uncoupling. And the first one is find emotional freedom. Because, and especially step number 1, because when we're first breaking up, separating, uncoupling, of course, there's so many factors: how long you were together, married, not, living together, or just like I said, your karmic load. There are those breakups in relationships, twin flame, soulmate, whatever, that are like 3 months, but they explode and you're picking up the pieces for years. So there isn't an equation, and it's so different for each person what the reactions are going to be. But yeah, no matter where we're at, there is that necessity for finding emotional freedom and stabilizing all of the anger and rage and frustration and sadness and upset. So we be with that and give it name. Is it Rena? Is there a little is Rena mutable? I think there's a little clanging going
yes,
on.
you're not you're not muted, Rena.
How can I mute
It's
myself?
not muting, Rena. I just
I'm
texted you.
through the phone and I'm not sure.
Your picture keeps flashing there and it's being recorded.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about this.
So
You swipe.
why don't you exit and come back in?
Swipe left
Okay,
to right
I'll do
if you're
that.
on a phone.
I'm so sorry.
Rena is larger than life.
Oh, stop. Okay, I'll step out.
And then after a while, like I said, it's a nonlinear process. After and while finding our emotional freedom, we head to step 2, reclaim your power and your life. Because when we partner up, obviously we build that life together and we change and we take on. So step 2 is a big disidentification from who we were in the relationship. And on some, depending upon, again, all those factors mentioned earlier, it can be sometimes necessary to go back to who we were, or at least look back and look at the shifts and take them all apart. And of course, at the same time, the old baby with the bathwater, keep all the good things too, and remember the positives. So step 2 is often a very crunchy one, and sets us up for step 3, the crunchiest of them all, which is break the pattern, heal your heart. And the conscious uncoupling is kind of this process. The 5 steps are kind of a deep dive in and then a climb out. And so it's step 1, step 2, and step 3 is really often most intense. And then 4 and 5, we climb up. But this breaking the pattern, healing your heart, that's going really far into the early life wounds. And if it's in your cosmology, even past life stuff and soul contracts, that's not everyone's cup of tea. So may or may not get to go there with a client. But one neat thing I hadn't done specifically prior to conscious uncoupling work was soul to soul communication. And it's been just beautiful doing that for myself and with clients. And then, of course, if anyone here is familiar with attachment theory, what happens in those developmental years with mom particularly, but also dad too, the anxious attachment or avoidant attachment, and the lucky ones secure attached, but unfortunately not the majority. And so those, facing how this breakup or divorce really pushes on those old wounds of abandonment or rejection or any unlove, any old abuse, so often comes up during a breakup, divorce. And so step 3, break the pattern, heal your heart, we really dive as far as possible into the muck. And that's really the shifting point, which sets us up for step 4, become a love alchemist. Because it's so easy to, in the process, and again, we're trained and conditioned to have the enemy images of the former, and we're rewarded for venting our story and talking negatively and seeking out whatever distractions. But to actually working on becoming a love alchemist is remembering the good. There was something that attracted you to that person, right? And the old cliche I still think is true. It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all, right? So step 4, we step back into the love and the possibility. And sometimes it's not possible to make direct amends. You know, sometimes there are the abusive situations and it's you have to have no contact. But when possible, it is really great in that dive in step 2 and 3 where we take the responsibility, and there's generally flood after flood after flood of insight. It can be really amazing to have some amends conversations and be really working on the closure and completion. Or at the very least, some amends to yourself, some promises after you've identified the patterns and where they came from, to really make an amends to yourself. Hey, you know what? Never again am I going to date that gal or guy with those patterns and bad boy, bad girl, or whatever, toxicity, codependent, whatever your issues are. To really make the self amends is so powerful. And the commitments not to repeat those patterns really sets us up for, if we choose, hopefully at some point in the future, to try the love game again, romance game again. So that's a powerful, powerful step. And then step 5, create your happy even after life. And it's a fun saying that Katherine, the author and founder, came up with. The tagline is living happily even after. And so step 5 is really putting it all together. For certain couples, there can be a ceremony. There can be an uncoupling ceremony, doing something with the rings or in front of friends. That's a beautiful opportunity. My former and I did it was on Zoom because of the pandemic and we were across the country, but a beautiful, beautiful ceremony. It's wonderful. And creating the happily ever after life is putting in place, creating and putting in place new agreements. Sometimes you have to go cold turkey, and that can be optimal, but especially when there's like children involved, there's co-parenting. And so having new agreements and committing to those, really, really powerful from the confidence that we've gotten from all that work. And it's not just with the other, it's also with yourself and others. Step 5 too, we also clean up the community relations. So there's some negotiation with how you talk with friends, and really that respect and peace I mentioned at the outset as the overarching themes. How to implement that on a practical level, because it's so easy to try and polarize others and get certain friends to be on one side or the other. Or if you share a church community or a spiritual community, you want to really be conscious with how you communicate to your community and friends. So that's a really, really big reorganization time. So so those are the 5 steps. And I want to just mention how, again, this conscious uncoupling as a philosophy really applies to other relationships, not just romantic, and again, the focus on the self work. We also do a lot of Ho'oponopono. If you're familiar with that technology at all, I love you, please forgive me, I apologize. Very, very beautiful. So that's some of the context. And I want to, look at that. I just did a time check, 10:34. Great. I wanted to save a lot of time for questions. So we can get in 10 minutes of questions. But first, I wanted to go back to Thomas and our other theme today of the laughter. Yes. And levity. Preparing, and it's so deep and intense, the split that happens and everything that comes up with divorces and breaking up. I love bringing in the levity as much as possible. So I want to end there with the me talking part, with the levity to try and bring to the intensity of this, of uncoupling. So that's the brief bit. I wanted to do 35 minutes so I could have 10 minutes of questions or stories or anything. So thank you so much. And let's.
So before we do that, I just want to alert people that this will be recorded and posted on YouTube. Your sharing included with right now.
So Melanie had her hand, and then Samuel that I can see.
I love this topic, and it's partly because it's been a long time since I had a divorce, but I've had a couple of them, and I've had both kinds, the good and the bad. And it not in that order. The bad and the good was the way it went. The second one was a lot easier because I married better the second time. And when I basically decided it wasn't working anymore and that we needed to split up, and our relationship was very harmonious, and he was a good person, and we went to the same lawyer, and she said she said, you guys really don't want to do that. I said, yes, we do. We know what we want to do, and we have to have somebody to do it legally. And, we just want to split this down the middle, and we're both good with this, and blah, 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 blah. But she was like, why don't you guys go home and think about this and come back? I'm like, no, this is what we want to do. So it was really good. And we're still very good friends. And, I got, I'm very close with his children, and really, really a good thing. Really a good thing. I mean, it was hard. I'm not saying it's not hard.
A lot of work.
It's hard for you personally, if it's a good one or a bad one. It doesn't matter. It's still a big loss.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that's
Yeah,
all.
thanks, Melanie. And that reminds me of a very good point, and it's beautiful if you can become friends. But again, we're looking at that overarching goal of peace and respect. Because there's a societal pressure to say, oh, let's be amicable. And was your divorce amicable? Was your breakup? Are you guys still friends? And that's not the necessary goal of conscious uncoupling. It's, are we respectful? Is there peace? And what did we discuss earlier, that the harmony, right? Those are even higher aspirations than just friendship. Friendship is great, but how beautiful to have that, maybe even kindness and generosity towards each other. So yeah, thank you, Melanie, that's a very important point too. Samuel.
I just wanted to say, it sounds like you might not have needed a lawyer, just a good accountant. You're splitting 50-50. Anyways, my question is, we're all run by very, very deep subconscious beliefs. And our awareness of what's going on is oftentimes just scratching the surface. And we end up marrying our mother or marrying our father. And a lot of talk is nice. But how do we really break through that deep, deep conditioning? What are some like hypnosis or past life, or there should be some techniques to be able to break through to a deeper level if you want to really change.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I would say, is to adopt the mindset of this being an opportunity, because it's so easy to go into shame or blame, but to think, oh wow, as we take responsibility for our peace, and how did I get into this mess, and how did I end up marrying my mother again, and why do I keep attracting these bad boys? To actually reframe it in our mind. I'm a big NLP fan, so just to start with that basic tenet of reframe this as an opportunity to once and for all change the pattern of abuse, or stop finally picking the same dynamic over and over again, and start with yourself and self-care. So yeah, that's first and foremost, is to shift it into an opportunity.
There's Mary Grace has her hand up.
I just wanted to make a brief comment that from my point of view, it doesn't matter who's attracted to me. It's who I'm attracted to. And in my own experience, I don't look at, I've been married twice before. This is my third marriage. I don't look at any of those or other relationships as a mistake. I look at it as, at that point in my life, that was part of my learning experience, looking at to see, oh, what was I to learn there? What was I to experience there? And keeping the focus on my own process with it, rather than villainizing the other person, which just isn't helpful.
Right. Yeah. It's not emphasized in the book enough, but it sounds, what I'm picking up, Mary Grace, and which is very beautiful, another great goal, is to be resentment free. all the couples and individuals I've worked with, I've noticed my little theory, I don't think I've seen it yet. Maybe I borrowed it from somewhere, but my little hypothesis is anger happens. We're human beings. We trigger each other. It happens. Anger happens. If it doesn't get resolved sufficiently, it calcifies into resentment and builds up and builds up and builds up. And then we end up divorcing or breaking up. And so again, the opportunity from conscious uncoupling is to be resentment free and not have any last things pulling on us from that former. So yeah, I wanted to name that. It sounds like it really did great with it being without resentment. What a free, great place to be. Yeah. Did Whitney have her hand up?
Yeah. I've never been divorced. I had a wonderful marriage, but I married very late because I always said, I don't want to get married just to get divorced. Because I saw all my friends marrying these weirdos and I couldn't understand the relationships and they did get divorced. But that's a judgment on I don't mean to go there. But I'm dating and I've had a lot of heartbreak and a lot of not working out and, and that it isn't a divorce, but it's still the loss and it's still not going forward, and I guess I kind of see it as a paradigm I haven't heard you directly relate to is addiction, codependency. I guess you did say that, that self-reflection, self-responsibility, and but there's always sort of, for me, in a way, I think I have a shame thing going on, or just that I'm not good enough. What's wrong with me? And it's kind of that cycle that I have worked very hard to step out of, but it is sort of a recurring thing. And I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. Two things. Number one, I want to be very clear that you mentioned you haven't been divorced, but breakups, emotionally and trauma-wise, from the trauma standpoint, can be and are often just as bad as a divorce. So we don't make any big distinction between the two. Okay, that's the first thing I want to name and normalize the trauma response. You said a lot of great things, all the hard work you've done on self-responsibility and self-control. I would offer, especially looking at shame and codependency, I would offer and add to that list, as tried as it may sound, but it's so true, the self-love piece.
Mm-hmm.
So many of us didn't have the optimal childhoods and weren't modeled love from our parents, who also, with the baby boomers, were getting into the 40, 50, 60% divorce rate. So we didn't have any models. No one taught us. This isn't taught in school. Conscious uncoupling certainly isn't taught widestream. How to have a successful marriage isn't taught, And then even prior to that, self-love is the deep thing. So even though it's heard over and over and over again, you just can't scream it too far from the rooftop. So, yeah.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Bill, do you get the last word? Any last words?
Just you really struck me with that last comment there, Bo, about teaching. And there's so many things that I feel that kids, I really believe kids should be taught that it's totally ignored. And one of those would be such things as how to end a relationship with respect and peace, amicably. So,
that's the key word. So to sum it all up in one word, talking to the mastery circle and all of us burgeoning and aspiring and continuing masters, is maturity. What's the end game of the peace and the respect, and ideally generosity and kindness, is how mature can we be with the other? Yes, we have to hold ourselves and love ourselves, but as we're treating the other one with that mature nature, how it goes out into the field and our family, taking care of our families, their families, the community. So it can really go out. So thank you, Bill. I wanted to say that the summing word was to end it maturely.